Hey there, it's your favorite talking torso, or at least I would hope so. So I was thinking to myself today, I do a lot of gun stuff, like a lot. I have a tremendous amount of guns, the number of which I will not go into detail about, but to the point where there's always something to be done, always something that's on the back burner, on the list, etc., etc. So I've always got something in my hands that I'm juggling around. So a lot of that stuff, most of it, like 99% of it, is all stuff that I would say is not worth a video, but I figure let's give this a shot and see how it goes. Just kind of, go along and see how things go, and just kind of sit and talk for a while I work on things. So that's what we're going for here. So these are, well, works in progress, obviously. So we've got, this is a Cobra Street Sweeper, and this is an Armcell Striker 12. They're basically the same design, but minor differences between them. Let me show you what I'm doing with them. So like I said before, we got a Street Sweeper here and a Striker 12 here. Obviously they don't exactly look as they should. This one's all torn apart and encased in who knows what, and this one's wrapped up like a Christmas present. So why is that the case? Let me go into it here. So way back when, a bunch of politicians got together and decided that semi-automatic, or ish semi-automatic, these are actually double action only, but that's here nor there. Anyway, they figured that something that would fire as fast as you could pull the trigger in 12 gauge in a 12 round capacity, ooh, that was just super scary, so we couldn't have that. So what they did was they took the Street Sweeper, the Striker 12, and the USAS 12, which I don't have because they cost about $4,000 and they do absolutely nothing that the Sega 12 won't do, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, they took those three and banned every single one of them by name. They didn't ban them necessarily. They put them on the NFA under destructive devices because some people don't understand that every single shotgun, 12 gauges anyway, have a caliber of about .72, 72 cal, give or take, because it's a big bore kind of thing, and those by default kind of have a sporting exemption, but willy-nilly, as they please, they can say, no, that doesn't have a sporting exception anymore, therefore it has a bore of over 50 cal, therefore it's a destructive device. And that's exactly what happened. So these guys, banned by name, well, again, not banned, they were just reclassified into destructive devices, which is of course the same category as your explosives like pipe bombs, or your huge cannons like your 20 mils and etc. Nowhere near the level of destruction as, say, a grenade launcher or something, but nevertheless, they classify them as that because, you have a name like the Street Sweeper, and, well, it sounds really scary, so we can't have that. Anyway, long story short, these are both classified as destructive devices because they have a bore larger than 50 cal. So what's going on with them, right? Well, the Street Sweeper here, this is not a Street Sweeper. This is not made by Cobra. This is made by me. So let me explain. This was a parts kit. See, way back when, in ye olden days, these were not destructive devices. They had 18-inch barrels. They were just, your everyday, ordinary shotgun, legally speaking, anyway. Bit of an interesting design, but we'll get to that later. So they were just classified as a regular old shotgun, so they followed all the NFA requirements therein. But then halfway about through the process, they said, oh, no, these are destructive devices now. We'll let you register them for free, but you still got to register them. So a couple people said, not doing that. Registration is one step away from confiscation, etc., etc. We've all heard the spiel, and of course it's not necessarily wrong, but again, that's another topic for another day. Anyway, they said, instead of registering it, I'm going to chop this thing up, I'm going to destroy it, and it's just going to be a hunk of useless metal. So that's what this one was. This one was a parts kit, actually, cut into 3 pieces per ATF regulations, but I've been rebuilding it. So the reason it's all taped up and really wrapped up like a Christmas present, it's just about getting around Christmas time, isn't it? So Merry Christmas to me. I'll get down and wrap this thing when it's done. Anyway, cut into 3 pieces. You had the receiver chopped here and right here. This little dongle right here, I had to actually draw it up myself and have it manufactured. Tried to do it myself, but long story short, it didn't work out. I stuck it in the lathe, I got it just right, I got this center hole perfect, except I was using the wrong measurement, and that was off by about 1/4 of an inch or so, and ruined the whole thing. Absolutely perfect except for that. I was actually really impressed with my machining abilities on that, but a little off. So anyway, had to have that machined up by 3D Hubs. Love those guys. They'll make pretty much anything you want except for, say, a receiver. So that was one piece that just did not come with the parts kit. They said, oh no, we can't do that. If we give you that, then we'll get into huge trouble with the ATF, which may or not be the case. But either way, had to machine that up, have it TIG welded back on. I don't have a TIG welder myself. I'm not super handy with a TIG machine, so I outsourced this to a buddy of mine. He made a little oopsie. It's actually a little bit offset there. It's a little skewed that way, so I had to stone the whole thing to match up with it a little bit more. This is just a guiding piece more than anything. It's not actually integral to the structural integrity of it or anything like that, but anyway, had to get that lined up just right so everything would fit. So I've been basically just rattle canning this in a nice flat black, and hopefully it'll match the rest of it. I haven't really checked because I got to unwrap the rest of it first, but I've got about maybe 5-6 coats on there right now, so should be just about time to do that. So let me go ahead and pull all this off, and I'll show you the weld as well on the top here where that was originally split off. I went pretty overboard on wrapping this thing up because I've had past experiences where I didn't do quite as good of a job, as much due diligence as I should have, and you get paint in places where it really shouldn't be. So really wrap the hell out of this thing. Alright, so you'll see floating up top there, this is one of these. I think these are Armcell? I cannot remember off the top of my head, but I think these are Armcell OEG optics. It's occluded eye gun sights is what that stands for. Basically a red dot with the front cap closed is how they operate, which is super weird, but it does actually work. Provided you have two functional eyes, that dot will, as it does when you have a red dot that's closed off, superimpose itself onto your other eye. And it works surprisingly well for a little teeny tiny shotgun like this. And the benefit of that is actually when you have the stock folded, obviously it's taking up all the front space in front of that, so if this was a tube you couldn't see down it in the first place, but since it's basically just blacked off, well, it doesn't really matter. So it works out pretty nicely actually. And then of course you can see the weld job here that slapped those two halves of the receiver back together. Did a fairly decent job with that one. I got a ground flat, need to paint it up, but that's the next step anyway. Oh, also, funny story, these guys, they are still in business. This is a brand new manufacturer made, believe it or not, specifically for the street sweeper itself. Blew my mind that they're still around, still manufacturing stuff, but they are. So yeah, cool. Cost me about 80 bucks, I think, for that, and that's with the tritium insert as well. There's a cheaper model, of course, but well, tritium, I'm not going to say no to that. So just really super cool. Blew me away that they were still around. Oh, and one more thing while I'm getting this all nice and unwrapped here. The Street Sweeper Striker 12 was featured in Resident Evil 4, which is one of my favorite video games of all time. And since I do like video games, I like guns, I like video games and guns put together, I really do want to do a kind of a feature on that with Resident Evil 4 guns and anything others that catch my interest. But so I've got a couple of them now. I've got the Striker 12, obviously. I've got the TMP, or the TP9 rather, the modern iteration of it, and also the SL8, which is the semi-auto rifle. And I've had this planned out for years now. I've had the bomber jackets and the spandex undershirts ready to go for quite a while. I just haven't had the time to actually put that all together. So one step at a time. All right, finally got that all cleared off. Okay, so as mentioned, this is your Cobra Street Sweeper. Or is it? No. See, originally on the Cobra guns, the serial and manufacturing information, all of that was on this front plate here, right at the bottom. As you can see, it's the same on the Striker 12. Kind of hard to see, but trust me, it's there. But you'll notice this one conspicuously absent as of now, because that is, as I mentioned, had to manufacture that, brand new. So what is this thing? Well, this is not a Cobra gun. It's not a street sweeper. But it is a gun made from Cobra Street Sweeper parts. So what is it? Here's the question that I'm trying to get at here. Since the Street Sweeper was banned by name, the Cobra Street Sweeper, and this is legally speaking not a Cobra Street Sweeper, this is technically an SS-12 as I named it on my ATF Form 1, is this a destructive device? Now the answer to that is yes, because I registered it as one, but if I didn't, would it have been? If I would have kept the 18-inch barrel, would this have been just another shotgun who is deceptively similar to a Striker 12 or Street Sweeper? Well, that's a wonderful question, and I asked the ATF, and they said, ooh, send it in, we'll tell ya, and did not want to do that. So this is a registered destructive device, unfortunately, so we may never know. So moving on over here, the Striker 12, what is going on with all this? This looks super funky. What did you do to it? Well, let me explain the thought process here. Both of these guys came to me with 18-inch barrels, and since they're a destructive device, there's no actual barrel requirement involved with that. With a short-barreled shotgun, that's anything under 18 inches, short-barreled rifle, anything under 16 inches. These are kind of an odd mid-ground, but as they are destructive devices, that stamp supersedes any short-barrel restrictions, meaning that they can be whatever barrel length you want. They can be 18, they can be 20, they can be 2 inches if you care for it. Point is, barrel length doesn't matter. So, I said, you know, if there's no requirements, why don't I just chop them down where they really should be, because this was, it's kind of the goofy pencil barrel sticking out the end like that, which just looks absolutely silly. So, there's no real reason not to, so why don't I go ahead and do that? So, we've done that on the Street Sweeper here, absolutely no problems, but there is one key difference between these guns, which makes that a huge problem on this guy, which is why it's all dolled up as it is. You see, this is the extra barrel for the Striker 12. This is the extra barrel for the Street Sweeper. A little different, ain't they? So this one is ribbed for her pleasure, but absolutely not for mine. Let me tell you why. This is the Street Sweeper barrel, nice and smooth, nothing going on there, no threads, no anything. You just buzz it off right at the end, and no problemo. You just crown that and you're good to go. Striker 12, however, this little knurled cap right here, that holds this forend on. It kind of clamps it down, sandwiches it in between the shoulder up there, and we'll show you that later here. Striker 12, on the other hand, that nut, they had one right here, but it wasn't threaded. It was just kind of loosey-goosey on there, just for looks. The actual threaded portion on the Striker 12 is at the muzzle. Meaning, if you cut this barrel down, thinking that it was threaded at that muzzle nut, the same way it is here, you would be absolutely mistaken. Because this is threaded at the top. This is just a barrel shroud, this is just a sleeve that goes over top of it. You can see the two have different materials going there. So the point is, you cut this off the end of the Striker 12, and there's absolutely nothing holding this forend in place. So what do? We essentially have that excess barrel, and this is a thick barrel. Like, you would not believe how thick that is. Take a look. Like, that's the original shoulder of the barrel. Super duper thick, ridiculously thick. So you have plenty of room to work with. And then you thread it in your Sega 12 or Vepr 12 threads. I had outsourced that to a good buddy of mine, a phenomenally talented gunsmith over at Anthony at Evolutions. Just could not recommend his work enough. There's one minor problem with this though, but it's, again, super duper minor and I can take care of it myself, but we'll get into that. So basically, originally, you have this little shoulder right here. That's this forend. You'll notice has little bits. It just sits on the shoulder right there, and then you would have a cap that would cinch that down, get it nice and tight and snug. That was not the case. Had to have this threaded, and it took me quite a while to find a muzzle device that was as phenomenally beefy as this one. Most are coming out to like here, just short by like 1/8 of an inch, if not more. But this one, I can't remember the exact model, I'll throw it up on the screen here. But this one mates up 100% 1-to-1. Same exact thickness as the fore end here. Just, I'm blown away by how tight of a fit that is. Could not have asked for a better fit. Now what I'll probably end up doing is getting another one of these and just turning it down on the lathe to where it's just kind of sitting flush with that. But I don't really mind having a big old beefy comp at the end there. That's perfectly fine with me. So that's what's going on with that. Unfortunately, couldn't get this threading in tight enough to where that could really cinch down on here. There's just the slightest bit of play in the fore end once that's all tightened up. So I'm gonna have to shim that with just a little piece of something. I could turn that on my own lathe without too much issue, so not a problem there. But that's this one. So what's all this junk going on at the back here? Well, it's a housing. I 3D printed. It is a super tight fit. Basically, that was to allow it to fit on a lathe to be threaded properly. So here is what your Striker 12 looks like without all the guts going on at the back. The rear, the receiver, all the injection molded stuff covers all that up. And this is the guts of it. That's the clockwork mechanism. That's the hammer in there. And these triggers are just awful. They're probably hands down the worst triggers that I've ever felt. They're about 25 pounds for a full pull. And you get there's a lot of travel room. Quite a bit. Why is that? Well, if you take a look in the back here, so you've got 3 springs. You've got 1, 2, and the one on the hammer itself right there, 3, all super heavy, and you're fighting against every single one of those when you're pulling that trigger. It's a very, very long and very stiff pull. As I mentioned, the absolute worst trigger that I've ever felt in my entire life, and I've felt some awful ones. This is just atrocious. All assembled and everything, you can literally drop this thing from about 2.5 feet onto the trigger, catch it by the trigger, and it still will not go off. It takes about 3 feet of drop distance for that to actually fire the gun, which is... There's a lot of neat things about these guns, but a lot of downsides too. So here's an interesting bit of trivia. Since I had this threaded for Sega 12 threads, I can do something a little interesting with it. And again, I'll have to shim that at some point because that's just going to slop around. But nevertheless, as I was saying, this little adapter here is for Salvo 12. Would you look at that? Now, the Striker 12 is a very rare gun, and very, very seldom still do you see shorter barreled versions of them for the aforementioned reasons. They're almost always the 18-inch variety because people don't want to cut them down because, well, then you have to go in and do something like this. So, point is, you will probably never see something like this, a Salvo 12 or 12-gauge silencer of any variety on a Striker 12. Mostly because it's phenomenally stupid. How these things work, they're essentially gigantic revolvers, so putting a can on one, not a great idea. You're going to get a tremendous amount of blowback and cylinder gap expulsion, which is not going to be a good time, but still, super duper neat. Let's get this thing back together and see how it looks. So this is just basically an empty shell that fits around the actual receiver of the gun. And it's a little tricky getting it on and off, especially this little nub right here. It's just press fit into that little outcrop right there. But you're not going to know that until you start fussing with it because there's really no information about this out there. So I had to go about this very, very carefully trying to get that off because, oh, what if it had an indentation in there or something? But luckily it did not. They just push straight out. And because I'm fortunate enough to have them just push straight out, they essentially just push straight back in as well. Get that all nice and snug in there. And again, that little button there just fits right into that little guy. It takes a little bit of encouragement, of course. I may need to get my mallet for this, but see if I can get it by hand. Ah, look at that. There we go. Perfect. So then all that plastic junk is just secured up top with a couple of countersunk screws right there and on the sides as well. Oh, come on, little guy. And then just one on either side. All right, just like that, your receiver's back together. But there's still more to do, of course. Cannot stress enough how awful that is. And that's only to get it to rotate the drum, which we'll get to in a moment. Getting it to actually fire, well, there's two stages to it. That is to rotate the drum, and then that is to get it to fire. Really awful. All right, so now we have the drum itself. It's got two little back plates here that you need to finagle just right. And to line up with the cutouts and the grooves and the tracks in the front and rear of the receiver. It's really not too bad, but very finicky. So we do that. A little bit of encouragement. Okay, so it's an exceptionally tight fit, but that's more beneficial in the long run. So give that a couple love taps. It'll seat fully, and you'll see up here we have two screw holes on either side that lock that drum into place. And we've got just, again, some little screws and washers here that tie the whole thing together, as is fashion with Cobra stuff. So things have been going pretty well lately. Pretty well, can't really complain. Got a new place to shoot. It's about a 4.5 hour drive, but that's, believe it or not, actually better than what I was doing previously at about 6.5 hours. So improvements there. Still have not located any land locally. The plot that I was going to get was completely landlocked, and there's a lot of back and forth about getting access to that, and ultimately just didn't pan out. So that's all right. You know, there'll be others, but take a little while to show up. And there we have it. That is a Striker 12. Just needs one additional component, and that is the winding key. This is what drives the clockwork mechanism, which allows the whole thing to spin freely. So we take our key, run it through the other key, and key the key back into the key. And this one spins much easier than it does on the Street Sweeper for a number of reasons, but mostly just because the Street Sweeper is a cheap imitation. It's the same design, but a couple of shortcuts here and there that really don't do it any favors. Like, for example, on the Striker 12, you'll notice it has a front sight. This has no sights. No sights at all, apart from the red dot that I threw on that, but that's aftermarket, so, you know. I don't believe it's actually screwed in. Does it screw in as it goes? It looks like it does. Okay. And there we go. Once you get that all snug, you'll actually start ratcheting into the clockwork mechanism in there, which, if you pull the trigger, rotates all that, and you can see it from the front there, hopefully. The big Mondo cylinder in there just slaps around such a considerable amount of force. Until it doesn't have any gusto. Here's a barrel where it used to be, and barrel where it is now. And again, I would like to really cut this down to right about there, so just to get it nice and flush with the original look of it. But either way, that's your Striker 12. So then let's get this little guy back together as well. just to point out, it's got the same sort of arrangement here. You've got a little threaded bit up at the top, and this is on there real super snug. I don't want to whack it off, but with a little convincing, it absolutely will. But nevertheless, you've got the same arrangement, a little ring around the top that snugs in between that shoulder and this end cap here, and this is substantially larger than the threading that I got it in. As you can see, the two are very, very different. This base one much wider, but that's all right. As mentioned, we finally did find a muzzle device that was the same width, that took the same Sega 12 threading. So, all set. And putting the drum back on to the street sweeper here is the same exact process. Really nothing to it. Okay, and there you have it. The street sweeper is all back together and good to go. Actually, let me show you what this sight looks like here. So as mentioned, this is an occluded eye gun sight, meaning that there's actually no end to it. It's essentially just a blacked out tube with a dot projected into it. I'm not sure if that's showing up on camera, but trust me, it's there. They work surprisingly better than you might think. Again, if you want to simulate that experience, well, just take any old red dot that you have and put your hand over the end of it and you'll see exactly how they operate. Oh, this is stupid. All right, let's take it over. Okay, well, there you have it. It is the Cobra Street Sweeper and the Armsel Striker 12. Two projects. Basically done. You know, just little things working on here and there. But this, I'm real happy with how this turned out. It's so stupid, and like I said before, this thing is a giant double action only revolver, and yeah, putting a silencer on there, you're gonna get just a huge amount of cylinder gap blowback, but you know. That's all right. That's all right. This is stupid, and I love it. And well, see you next time.